How many of you have seen Les Mis? Then you know what I'm talking about, the opening scene, where Jean Valjean, who is desperate, who was in prison for stealing a loaf of bread because his sister was hungry, already an injustice. He's certainly not a criminal, right? He's the desperate poor. And he's released finally, but the one constable is after him. He doesn't trust him and he doesn't like him. And he's looking for a reason, just looking for a reason to throw him back in prison. And the good bishop one night gives Jean Valjean a place to stay. And he's so desperate that in the middle of the night, he gets up and he steals the silverware, throws it into a sack, and runs out the door. But the constable is waiting for him, and in a few blocks, he catches him. He said, where'd you get that? And he lies to him. He says, the bishop, I was a guest of the bishop, and he gifted these to me. You see? So the constable says, all right, we'll see about that. And he goes back to the bishop's house. They wake up the bishop. He says you made a present of these. Is that true? The bishop could have said, yes, which he does. Yes, I did give those to him. But he does this amazing, unexpected thing and says to him, but you forgot. You left so quickly. Would you leave the candlesticks behind? They're worth even more. Here. You see, this is the Incarnation. The bishop isn't interested in an apology. He knows he's been wronged. But with grace, he masks and protects him from the law, from the judgment that would come. And when the constable leaves, he says, I have redeemed you. Do not squander this. And as the story unfolds, we see what that one seed of generosity does to transform not his life alone, but so many. So the gospel is not just about, God being nice. It's about the unimaginable generosity that has nothing to do with justice, that has nothing to do with worthiness, that has nothing to do with our wrongdoing. But it is precisely in the moment that we expect so little and receive so much that our lives are transformed. Right? This is what Jesus is trying to communicate through everything in the gospel. You see, when he's sitting with tax collectors and sinners, whatever sinners mean, right? And the Pharisee says, what are you doing? Eating with these people. Because you have to understand, table fellowship was an association with the people you were dining with. Why would a holy man, a rabbi like you, associate yourself with sinners and tax collectors? What I want you to understand is Jesus never denies that they were tax collectors and sinners. He never says, no, they're not. Instead, he turns it around. He says, because it's the sick who need the doctor. You, holy rabbi, should be sitting here with me. Because these are the people who need it. He turns the challenge around. Not to deny that the people he was with were what they were being accused of, but saying precisely for that reason is the generosity of God embracing them. And that's too where you should be, you see. This is exactly every opportunity that Jesus gets to overcome boundaries, he does. To the scandal of the religious authorities, to the scandal of the civil authorities, all to show this radical embrace that Jean Valjean discovers in this bishop. To be a contemplative Christian is to ask, where can that grace be made real in my flesh, in my relationships? Who is in need of that abundant grace? Because that's where transformation happens. So let me continue here where I left off. So while we acknowledge the sort of problems, the wrongdoings in the world, we insist, right, that these have neither the last word in a cosmos that God has deemed good and beautiful. So middle of that paragraph there on 39, perceiving this fundamental goodness, the Christian contemplative is one who falls in love with beauty. Have you ever thought of that? That it is our job, it is our vocation. I think it is even our tendency as contemplative-minded folks to fall in love with beauty. and comes to embody that beauty through one's engagement in the world, to become like that bishop. Indeed, it is the vocation of the contemplative to shed the obstacles that prevent us from seeing truth and beauty in all. It is all the more tragic, then, that Christianity has become associated in the popular mind with a body-hating worldview, or certain forms of doctrinal rigidity, institutional hypocrisy, scientific ignorance, and religious intolerance, assessments that too often bear merit. The rise of modern atheism in the West, with the precipitous decline in church attendance, must be understood at least in part as a purifying corrective to the spiritual, moral, and imaginative failure of religious institutions. The consequence of these failures is the church's diminishing capacity to convey beauty. It is, after all, beauty that attracts the human spirit and beauty that compels the human conscience toward the good, not the dry, rigid formulas of doctrine, nor the clinical dissection of biblical texts, nor the ethical demands to love, even before we ourselves have been made to understand not only that we are lovable, that's far too cliche, but that we are indeed love itself. And this, of course, is the beauty of what Christianity is telling us. We are created as beings for love. All we have to do is remember. And the way we remember is to practice letting go, practice dying to anything in me that is false, anything in me that is attached. The freedom that comes from that is profoundly more of a grace and a gift than anything else we're clinging to. But it starts with a remembrance. You're probably aware, as I talk about on the next page, you're probably aware of the song Amazing Grace that was written in 1772 by actually an Anglican clergyman named John Newton. And one of the things I found interesting growing up in the post-Vatican II church was that our hymnals were changed to say, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved someone like me. Now, I get it. We're all sick and tired of a sin-soaked, shame-based, guilt-ridden Christianity. I'm with you. But let me say this. If we don't understand the wretchedness of the human condition, we don't understand the amazingness of grace. You can't level one and appreciate the other. You can't get to Easter Sunday without Good Friday. The terror of history is ours to reckon with, and we must reckon with it. The writer John Newton was a slave trader. He understood the capacity for what humanity could do to one another. And it was precisely his understanding as he converts out of that, as he begins to wake up to the horror that his life had become, that he writes this. And the beauty of it is that you hear the hope in this song, in this hymn. Right? We don't have to, I think the church has made a terrible error in basically making us all think that all sinfulness should be reduced to what I call the pelvic issues. Sex, abortion, homosexuality, blah, blah, blah. It's all becoming, right? I always joke, what is the definition of a Puritan Christian? The overriding, relentless, and incurable fear that somewhere, someone in the world is having fun. You see, and there is that puritanical strain through Christianity that we have to open to. Yeah? We have to recognize that when we look at a collapsing ecological environment that's born of human civilization, we need to wake up. Right? When we understand the great crises we face today around the globe, we understand the wretchedness of the human condition. So, with that, we also understand the amazing grace. This is Jean Valjean and the bishop. Right? His state was desperate. And through this one beautiful act of grace, changed his whole life. How are we being agents of that when Jesus says, go be salt? Salt works by essentially dissolving. How do we disappear? Leaven works by disappearing as the bread rises. What does it mean, as Mother Teresa would say, her morning prayer, you know what her morning prayer was? Get me out of your way. Amen. And she'd go off and do her work, essentially. That was her morning prayer. So that needs to be, how do we get out of the way? What in me needs to get out of the way? Here's my obstacle, that bush Adam and Eve are hiding behind. State of wretchedness, state of grace. It's that close. Wretchedness and grace. See, all I have to do is get those obstacles out of the way and allow God to find me. So, let me again pause. I know some of this is a lot coming at you. It's a lot of intensity. Of course, I'm really summarizing thoughts that if you have read the book or plan to, you will see again. So this is, you'll have chances. Plus, I know you'll be able to kind of hear these recordings. But given the where we're at in our next hour here, I do want to give us another break. But just see, are there questions that might assist anyone in clarifying or moving the conversation or reframing something for you before we break? Okay.